Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to this room, welcome to my room, and to this new episode of INFJ Confessions. Today we're going to talk about, I'm going to tell you a bit more about my experience having the INFJ brand, my experience with the INFJ brand, how it came about, what are the positives, what are the challenges. This could also be a source of advice, to some of you who might be interested in developing a brand or at least starting a channel, or, I'm sure I know that there are some among you who want to do something around, the fact that you're INFJ and these things. And, it's always useful, I think, to kind of get a bit of feedback from people who either have been there or are still there doing the stuff and trying to learn from the experience. So what I can start by saying is I am lucky in the sense that over the years I have developed what I would consider, obviously within reasonable proportions. It's not like I'm a worldwide celebrity or anything like this, but I have developed a kind of identity, a kind of brand identity as an INFJ. If you like, my channel is perceived as a channel where INFJs or people who are interested in INFJs can go and they will have access to reliable information about INFJs. Maybe not everybody will agree with what is said by yours truly about INFJs, but at least people reasonably expect that they'll get an INFJ perspective. Now, this is due to the fact that, again, luckily enough, I am widely considered to be legitimately INFJ, which, is not a given. There's a lot of experiences that people have had having their type questions and things like that. So I'm seen as that, and I'm seen as someone who has, interesting things to say about the type and probably like thoughtful things to say, or at least a channel for thoughtful INFJs or thoughtful people that are interested in INFJs. Now, I think that what's contributed to this is, of course, my regular activity on YouTube for the last 5 years or so. I mean, that's contributed. But in terms of really solidifying my brand, and mind you, I never was really thinking in terms of branding ever. This is a kind of after the fact, ex post facto that I'm observing this. What established the brand, I think, in a kind of firm manner is really when I published the book, when I wrote The Ecstatic Soul. It's more than 2 years old now. You can still get it at the links below, by the way, if you haven't got it. I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I knew that I was going to sell more copies of it than my other books, but because it has a market, so to speak, and so I knew it was going to be read, but I had no idea that there were going to be thousands of people getting copies, and still going relatively strong. Like every month there are people getting copies of the book, and there's now people on the internet who talk about the Ecstatic Soul, and they refer to it. It's in conversation. So if you like, there's that. It's great. It's been of help to people. It's been it's been like food for discussions between people on Reddit, on YouTube, and other places. But it's also, from my perspective, it's really established me as, like the guy who wrote the book. And it kind of automatically, from the moment that the book is well received and is considered well researched and investigative and analytical, maybe a little bit too much for some people, but I think it's better than the opposite. It's better than writing a book that's kind of is so general and shallow in a way that it could be written about any type. So if you like, my book was never selling like crazy at any time. But the fact that it established a reputation as a well-researched source, I think explains why it didn't go like this, and then it sort of it's like it has this stable lifetime, which is really nice to see. It established me as someone who talks of all things INFJ and who has actually, you know, legitimacy backed up by having written a book. As you know, I'm writing a new book at the moment on the type, and this is also the source of some of these reflections which I'm sharing with you, because what's good about having this very strong INFJ brand identity for me is, first of all, the book is continuing to sell. I have an audience like you guys who are, it's relatively small community, you know, it's a little under 13,000 subscribers. Of course, among these subscribers, there's probably people who are kind of ghosts now. But, you know, it's not like I do crazy amount of views with my videos. However, I suppose the word is loyalty, you know. I think that there are people, I know there are people, I recognize their names in the comments, and some of them have been around for years, who are very loyal, you know. They don't do this necessarily out of pure loyalty to me. It's also because they do find interesting content in what I do. But maybe you can tell I've been out. I was actually out last night. I was out with a friend, and it's not done good things to my voice. But so maybe I will actually help myself to a glass of water. An INFJ on a night out. You don't know what's going to happen with that crazy inferiority, you know. So the fact that there is this loyalty, subscriber loyalty, if you like, it just means that there is this sense that we're kind of close, and it just means that a lot of people who watch my videos are probably going to get my book. Whereas you could imagine someone who has a lot of views, but not a lot of loyalty. Maybe they're really something people want to buy it, you know. So that's the advantage of having that strong brand. I think the disadvantage, because I do want to share some reflections on the disadvantages as well, or the challenges anyway. There are some. Of course, you can paint yourself into a corner, and that really is an encapsulation of the main danger. And you're facing it every day. I'm facing it every day. Like, think that it happens to everybody on YouTube. Think of Jordan Peterson, for instance. Like, regardless of what you thought of the man initially, you could probably say, okay, he was doing something that others weren't doing, and you can understand, you can explain his success. It just didn't come out of nowhere. You know, there's something compelling about some of his material. Now he's parodied more and more. Now, it's obvious, you know, that he's become memed. He's a meme in many ways. Not to say that that's the only thing he is, but that has clearly been happening in the last couple of years. Now you could say, okay, it's a conspiracy against Jordan Peterson. It's completely unfair and blah, 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 blah. Or again, you could sort of have an objective structural viewpoint where you say, okay, it did happen. Maybe it's unfortunate, but maybe he encouraged it somehow by his behavior. That became memeier in some sense. You know, people on the internet, they're ruthless, you know, like if you do something that's going to be memes, they'll meme it. So I think that he allowed himself to become that way by painting himself into a corner. He just had developed this brand, and I think in some sense he allowed himself to kind of let this brand overly influence his content. And because, you know, at some stage you're going to repeat yourself, like you either have to become more intense or more extreme in your views to continue surprising, continue exciting people, or you have to start applying like your views and frameworks, you know, from stuff that you were mastering to stuff that you're not really mastering. And I think that it can become silly at times, you know, and you really have to be careful, because if you start sounding like a parody of yourself, it can be bad for you, for your following, for everything. And in my specific case, you know, this is a real risk in some way. I always have to think, I don't want to become a parody of myself. Like someone who's just obsessed with talking about INFJs and has to feel like I need to put an INFJ filter on, like, go into the bathroom or shopping, like, you know, an INFJ shopping, what is it like? You know, just because on one level you could say the list of topics you could cover, for, you know, as an INFJ, from an INFJ perspective is endless, but you could easily fall into self-parody, and I have to resist it. So you have to be kind of endlessly creative you have to force yourself to be creative with what you do, the content that you produce and share with people. Sometimes creativity is not the number one factor. Like, for example, I might, and sometimes it's often a subscriber, someone who comments, who reminds me of that. They say, okay, you talked about, say, the door slam 3 years ago, or INFJ sense of humor. You've done it, maybe you have something new to say, maybe your perspective's changed. And so, you know, one way to keep things going is to return to already visited topics, but revisit them with an original perspective. So that's one way. But oftentimes you just have to be really creative, and it's challenging because you, again, you don't want to fall into self-parody. So you don't want to be so creative that you start talking about what it means to swim in the sea as an INFJ or something like that. But you still have to come up with new stuff. So how do you manage that? So, you know, what I would say is that it's a perpetual struggle. And what I try to do, and something that you might have noticed, is that I do broaden the sphere of what can be talked about from an INFJ perspective. So what I'll often do is I'll talk about something that is not necessarily about INFJs as such, or at least it's not specifically an INFJ thing. Often it covers more types. It can be like a sociological thing, or it can be a philosophical thing. It can be, you know, a theme that I choose. But I kind of try to think about what is added by taking an INFJ perspective on that. So in a way that allows me to kind of keep the brand identity, but still, like, flexibly enough that I can branch out. Because a strong brand identity is great, but it can also, like I said, it can really corner you, and it can ossify you, and you have to be careful with that. And one final thing I want to say is that it turns out that writing books on the INFJ type, like the Ecstatic Soul, and now the new one, the new manuscript, that's also very, very useful, because when you are writing, like, you're forced to think new things. Because of course you start with a plan in mind, what you are going to say that you haven't said before. But once you're faced with it, once you're actually writing, ideas keep coming in, because the writing process just puts you in a position where you have no choice but to think thoroughly and come up with new ideas. But then, you know, you put them together and you realize, okay, just by the process of writing this chapter, I could potentially make 30 different videos now, because I have new perspectives. So in a way that I hadn't expected, the books and the writing process is really contributing to keeping my ideas tank relatively rich when it comes to this topic. But like I said, it's a perpetual struggle. Like, you want to remain youthful in a way, and remain relevant, and not start kind of repeating yourself ad infinitum, or, you know, becoming kind of banal, or, you know, quite, what would be the word that I'm looking for? Like trivial, you know, becoming trivial in what you do. So it's a fine line, and I try to walk that fine line, you know, so hopefully I'm not doing too badly. Anyway, it's been a while. So for those who are still here, don't forget you can still get my book, The Infinite Castle, that the rumor about this one is the main character is an INFJ. I think the rumors are right. So if you want to explore that perspective fictionally, then that's the book. And like I said, if you have any inclination to support me on Patreon, that is always very welcome. It helps in these difficult times. Okay, so I will talk to you on Wednesday, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.